It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, another hugely volatile day on the financial markets as Donald Trump doubles down on his tariff plans. Significant falls around the world, including here in the UK. The FTSE 100 has now lost almost £250 billion in value since what Donald Trump called Liberation Day. And the US president is showing no signs of backing down, quite the opposite, in fact. Mr. Trump announcing additional tariffs of 50% on China. Also ahead tonight, the parents desperately seeking protection from their own children. We've spoken to a mother whose 14-year-old son put her in hospital and threatened to stab a teacher. His parents say police repeatedly failed to take their concerns seriously. Plus, the Birmingham bin row rumbles on. Talks between the City Council and union bosses end without agreement. And the Fire Brigade's union says its workers will not be stepping in to clear up the mess. And the King and Queen arrive in Rome for a state visit that coincides with their 20th wedding anniversary. All that's come, and much more on the UK Tonight. Well, we start this week where we ended the last, the financial volatility across the globe, thanks to Donald Trump's tariff plans. Markets everywhere are down again today, but no sign of the US president changing his course, quite the opposite, in fact, threatening China with even higher tariffs today. This is after Beijing retaliated against the measures he announced last week. We were expecting to hear from the president shortly. He is hosting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. A planned news conference by the leaders cancelled, but we may yet hear from the president. This is during their meeting in the Oval Office. This is how it works now. A meeting with fellow world leaders happens in the Oval Office. A lot is said then, and then there's usually a press conference. But for some reason, that today has been cancelled. Let's see if our US correspondent Mark Stone can shed some light on that, because that was quite an unexpected announcement, Mark.
The whole visit was unexpected. It was very last minute. It was a visit that was requested by President Trump. Netanyahu was in Hungary visiting Viktor Orban there over the course of the weekend, and then was asked whether he would come to Washington. I think the focus of the meeting is to be tariffs, but of course they will and are discussing Iran as well, and Gaza too. A horrific weekend in Gaza. For sure, the ceasefire there non-existent, so that will be a focus. But Israel had expected that it would escape the worst of Trump's tariffs. A day before Trump's tariff announcements last Wednesday, Israel preemptively cut all its tariffs that it places on US goods going into Israel in an attempt to remove any tariffs that Trump might put in place. It didn't work. Not only did Israel not get the lowest base level tariff of 10%, like the UK got, but actually got whacked with 17%, which was alarming to the Israelis. They didn't expect that. And so I think maybe Trump will be using this moment as a way to say to the world, to other countries who are wondering whether or not they can chip away at the tariffs they've been given, that yes, there is an avenue to doing just that. There is a negotiation. Maybe there'll be some announcement where the rate that Israel has been given will be reduced. But you're right, the news conference that was due to happen later on in the East Room at the White House inexplicably cancelled at the last minute. Indeed, Israeli officials I was talking to, I told them that it had been cancelled. They didn't even know that it was due to be cancelled. But there is due to be an Oval Office news conference of sorts that was due to get underway an hour ago. It's an hour and 5 minutes late. The pooled media, the select media who've been allowed to go in, are still waiting to go into the Oval Office. So it's very delayed. And while we wait, we know that the two leaders are having a private meeting. But, you know, SJ, on that issue of whether or not these tariffs that have been put in place are negotiable, whether countries can negotiate and chip away at those tariffs, we're getting very, very mixed messages. Donald Trump has suggested on a number of occasions that countries do have the opportunity to lower their own tariffs, to perhaps make sure that the tariffs America's put in place are removed. And yet his staff are saying something completely different. Peter Navarro is one of Donald Trump's trade advisors. We've spoken to him a lot over the past few weeks. He has just published an article, an opinion piece in the Financial Times, where he says this is not a negotiation. For the US, it is a national emergency triggered by trade deficits caused by a rigged system. And he goes on to say President Trump is always willing to listen, but to those leaders who, after decades of cheating, are suddenly offering to lower tariffs, know this is just the beginning. So very mixed messages from the White House. I think for leaders around the world, whatever comes out of this meeting with Netanyahu on tariffs will be instructive to them to determine what they may or may not be able to negotiate.
OK, Mark, we'll leave it there. We'll return to Mark Stone in Washington as soon as that meeting between Netanyahu and Trump gets underway in the Oval Office. They will be speaking in there. We'll take it live and speak to Mark for a reaction to that. In the meantime, let's talk about the financial markets, shall we? Around the world, they suffered yet more losses today. Traders really on edge over how Trump's tariffs plans will play out. Here, the FTSE 100 closed down by more than 4.3% at its lowest level for a year. It's now lost almost £250 billion in value since Trump announced his tariffs last Wednesday. Our business correspondent Gurpreet Narwan has the story of yet another hugely volatile day on global markets.
The warning signs are flashing red. Stocks are in freefall. Money is pouring into safe havens instead. Traders navigating markets thrown into turmoil by a volatile US president.
We have a predictably unpredictable leader of the free world who announced he was going to do something that everybody was expecting, but he did it in a way that upset the global world order. It was indiscriminate, it was wide-ranging. So what does that cause? Massive uncertainty. And when you get massive uncertainty, you get a markdown in prices. And you see this huge fall in indices.
And this is what massive uncertainty looks like. This is Wall Street's VIX index, also known as the fear gauge. It measures how much traders are willing to pay for insurance against price swings. It tells us how much volatility they're expecting in the US stock market over the next 30 days. And things, well, they haven't been this volatile since the pandemic back in 2020, and before that, the financial crisis of 2008. And both of them were followed by recessions. So more volatility to come, as if we haven't had enough of that already. Donald Trump announced his sweeping tariffs policy last Wednesday, and whatever cautious optimism traders may have had was swiftly shattered. Stock markets across the world plummeted. And after a brief respite over the weekend, well, they're still falling. Here in London, the FTSE 100 in the blue, that was down 4.38% today, while Germany's DAX in the yellow fell 4.26%. And Asian markets fared even worse. China's Shanghai Composite Index lost 7% on Monday, its worst day in 5 years. And this shows us how things have moved since Trump was elected. But let's set it all in a wider context. For the FTSE 100, we have seen bigger falls than this. Black Monday back in 1987 being the big one, but it does rank among them. And things haven't even bottomed out yet. In fact, they could still get worse.
The really, really bad scenarios of a full-blown global trade war with multiple retaliation is not priced by markets currently. The FTSE 100 is only 5% lower than it was on January the 1st. That's not the sort of stock market fall you would expect to see in a full-blown trade war.
Trump's first presidency gave us a president who cared about the success of stock markets. Well, those very markets have given his tariff policy a clear vote of no confidence. And still, he's not backing down. For Trump, this is the storm before the calm. He says he is willing to weather it to the very end. But markets are hoping he might still change course.
Well, back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer acknowledged that the tariffs from the US would pose a huge challenge to the UK's future. He was visiting Jaguar Land Rover today, a company that has paused exports to the US because of Mr Trump's tariffs. And the PM said he would back British car makers to the hilt. Our deputy political editor Sam Coates has this report.
The cutting edge of British manufacturing, the front line of the new global trade war. The Prime Minister here at Jaguar Land Rover, attempting to reassure an industry and the nation that he's on their side.
Nobody is pretending that tariffs are good news. You know that better than anyone. That is a huge challenge for our future, and the global economic consequences could be profound.
Growth is Keir Starmer's #1 mission. As he spoke, the US stock markets opened down badly, a global threat to his top goal.
This is a changing and completely new world, an era where old assumptions, which we've long taken for granted, simply don't apply any longer.
He doesn't believe this crisis is going to end quickly, and he knows that'll require more government intervention.
We have your back. This government will not just sit back and hope. That is how politics has failed you in recent years, sort of attempting to manage crises without fundamental change just leads to managed decline.
But real support costs money, and the government's self-imposed borrowing rules leave next to no wiggle room. Can they survive this crisis?
Can you say, without hesitation, that you will keep Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules exactly as they are for the whole of the Parliament and not come back at any point and say events mean that they need changing?
Well, Sam, this is a moment for stepping us up, as I've just said.
It was a very straight question. The Prime Minister spoke for 90 seconds without ever actually answering it. This was the closest he came.
The reaction to the challenges of the last few days is not for us to say, well, the first thing we'll now do is to put one side our fiscal rules.
But still, that wasn't a guarantee they won't be ditched.
Really important steps today for our country. Thank you.
In previous economic crises, the government has reached for a big bazooka to support business. But we currently tax so much and we borrow so much, that's just not possible this time. Now the government says it wants to do other things to help business. The Chancellor's message, she'll do what she can.
Today we are going further with new measures to support car manufacturers decarbonise in a way that is sustainable and good for jobs in Britain.
That means delaying a ban on hybrid cars and more flexibility to meet electric targets, yet more uncertainty for battery firms and those building charging points. But in factories across the country, there is a need for reassurance.
We're all concerned. There's a large proportion of our vehicle manufacture that does go out to the States. So we're really concerned that we don't want that to be constrained in any way, shape or form. The hope is that we get to a point where, we get back to a free trade agreement.
If this ban can't sort it, the cost of tariffs could be higher prices, lower pensions and fewer jobs. He knows how high the stakes are. Sam Coates, Sky News, Solihull.
Well, let's bring in Danny Blanchflower, shall we? A professor of economics at Dartmouth College and former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, who has no doubt had a very busy day watching all of this unfold. Your assessment, you're never shy in sort of telling us what you really think. Your assessment of what you've watched unfold today?
Well, I thought your coverage was really very good and very clear in the sense that Starmer has a set of fiscal rules that if all this stuff goes as it's going, he couldn't possibly follow. I mean, the idea that you'll sit back and hope, of course, is right. The reality is that the uncertainty is incredibly high. What's happening in the United States, where I live, is, well, unadulterated madness. And obviously what we see are consumers are very concerned about what's coming. Businesses are pulling their investment plans back. And as every hour goes by, Donald Trump says and does something crazier. But what that means is that this is a downside risk to global output, to global standards of living. And in the past, when we've been confronted by those things, we've seen global action from central banks and global action from fiscal authorities. And it looks like, because of what Donald Trump has been doing every hour, is that probably won't happen, which is really, really, really bad news for the global economy. And in reality, the central banks are probably going to have to step in. Rachel Reeves is going to have to step in, and we're in disarray.
Well, it's good to know that, our coverage has been clear today, because it seems like it's the only thing that is when it comes to this.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's good that we can provide that little bit of clarity. But when you say this could get really, really bad, the term global recession has been trotted out today. How much impact do you think what's happening at the moment could play into that? Because that's seemingly a real concern today.
Well, I think so. I mean, the last couple of times we've ever seen a collapse in the stock market like this, we've seen global recession. The problem in many ways is it takes a while to work out where you were. In the United States, there's a thing called the NBR Dating Committee, and they date the start of recessions, but it normally takes them a year to do that. I think what you'll see in the future, they'll date the start of a global recession as probably April the 1st. They probably won't do it for a year. And the question then is, what are we going to do? Because if you look at America, how is America going to lead central banks? How is America going to lead fiscal stuff? So I think the answer is that just the simple economics, let's just go with simple economics. Output for countries in the world is determined.
Danny, we're hoping for a little bit more clarity. Donald Trump speaking now with Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office. We'll leave it there and take our viewers straight there.